My title today is called Never Forgive Again. Now, I think some people are really excited about that because some people consider forgive a four-letter word. They don't want to hear it. They're like, no, because I've taught classes on this, and they'll go, no, you don't understand my story. How could I ever forgive them for what they did? And everybody has like a story of that one person. But that's what is we're going to talk about today, because we're going to do some exercises today to let go of anything that you have against somebody else. And a lot of what we've been talking about this month is it's like marrying heaven and earth. It's like whatever is above is also below. Whatever is outside is also inside. It's like allowing ourselves to know that we are on the path of the divine. We are awakening to that divine. And Colin Tippin, in his book Radical Forgiveness, he is pretty much of a master on this. He said, the way you never forgive again, and I'm going to quote him, he said, everything that occurs in our life, everything, so that we might have an opportunity to awaken to our spiritual truth and live from our divine nature. And when we look at it from that perspective, there is nothing to forgive. Because if everything has come forth for our highest good, who are we going to forgive? Ourselves? Forgiving ourselves for mistaking it as something less than good, or mistaking it and getting us stuck so that we don't move forward. Now, actually, he talks about there's three ways of forgiveness. You know, the first is we grew up with, oh, forgive Johnny for taking your ball. Okay, Johnny, I forgive you, but I still don't like you. You know, that's one way we learn to forgive. And then the second, all of a sudden we got spiritual. Actually, this is what I learned when I first came into this teaching, is you have to forgive so that you can keep your light shining on your spiritual path. But I still don't like you, and you still did me wrong. And then the third, like Colin said, is when you begin realizing that we literally brought everything in for our own growth, for our soul's growth, who do we have to forgive? I know years ago, our family went through this trauma and negativity and gossip about a brother that stole $1 million from my parents, and we could not stop talking about it. It bugged all of us. And I had one sister named Carol Neal, who was a minister in Religious Science International, and she would call and say, Mary Jean, just open your heart, you just have to love him. And I would go, Carol, I don't want to hear that. She goes, but you teach it. I said, I know, but I don't want to hear it. And yet I knew she was right. I absolutely had to open my heart. So my sister Luzette came to town, and we did release emotional enmeshment, which some of you have worked with my sister Luzette. And it was powerful. From that day forward, I could talk about him, but he wasn't like taking up room in my heart and in my mind. It, like the story left. It just left. I realized that it really didn't matter. It wasn't my money to begin with. He didn't take my money. He took my mother's money, my father's money. And it didn't even matter because this was his path, not mine. So I had to realize, what am I attracting into my life for my greater good? And it was one of the most profound healings, because ever since then, if anything upsets me or bothers me, I do not hold on to it. Because what holding on to it does, it stops my path from unfolding. So I'm going to tell you some of the things that Colin Tippin talks about. First of all, he says that we live in two worlds simultaneously. Vibrationally, we live in the divine or spirit, and we also live in the world of, he calls it humanity. And that you can actually vibrate with both of those at the same time. It's not an either or. He also says life is not random. It provides for the purposeful unfoldment of our own divine plan, with opportunities to make choices and decisions each and every day. Now, to be clear, the divine plan is our plan of unfolding to recognize who we are. The divine plan is knowing our spiritual essence. Whatever shows up, that we take that next step and we learn more about our connection with Spirit, that's our divine plan. Every time we actually realize we have nothing to forgive is part of our divine plan. Larry and I on Friday started a 5-day meditation class with Rupert Spiro. And it's online. And so for the first day, for 2 hours, we sat there meditating with him. He does a little bit of a guided meditation to make you aware of the presence and power of Spirit that you are. That's his whole thing, actually. For 5 days, that's what we're going to be doing, just spending those 2 hours twice a day breathing and being aware of our awareness. To be aware that something is aware of what's going on, and we're moving to that awareness of Spirit, and everything looks brighter. The colors look different. It started heating up outside. That was from our meditation. You're welcome. And it's such a privilege to, well, the first day we sat in the office and meditated together, and then the second day, which was yesterday, we sat on the couch because it was really pretty cold when we got up, and I wanted to huddle up in a lot of blankets. I figured you can meditate sitting on a chair or surrounded by blankets, so that's what I did yesterday. And he's amazing. I don't know how many of you have heard of him, Rupert Spiro, but he's on YouTube all over, and they sent us a copy of the Zoom meditation we had done. So this morning when I woke up, I just opened my phone and I clicked it, and I was back at Friday meditating with him this morning. It's like, I don't mind getting up at 5 in the morning if there's something to do. But sometimes I get up, I don't know about you. Have you ever done this? You get up at 5 o'clock and you go, oh, wow, it's 5 o'clock. How cool. And you walk around there. What do you do at 5 o'clock? I either read or I go back to sleep. But now I can just turn on my phone and do an hour meditation or 2-hour meditation with Rupert. But the reason I mention him is because he's so much like what Colin Tippin is talking about, and what Dr. Ernest Holmes talked about, and what metaphysics is all about, is that within you is the power and presence of Spirit. And our journey is to awaken to our magnificence. Our journey is to realize that life is divine. So Colin says there are a few things that you need to know. He said, first of all, well, let's see. I really like this. He said, okay, step 1, look what I created. You know how sometimes you get upset about what's in your life? Instead, just get excited. Look what I created. I created that. You don't say it to beat yourself up. Oh, I created it. I must not be spiritually aligned. Something must be wrong with me. Why would I create that? No. Just get excited. I created it. Let's say it together. I created it. That didn't hurt you, did it? No. But sometimes we say that with, oh, no, I did something wrong, and you feel guilty. But don't ever say that to somebody else. Because sometimes people are going through pain and they aren't at the level of consciousness you're at. And if you go say to them, well, you created it, do you know how they feel? Have you ever had someone say that to you? Yeah. Well, you created it. What'd you create that for? If someone says that to you, you now say, buy Colin Tippin's book, Radical Forgiveness, and you'll know why I created it. Or you can say, I created it because it's part of my journey of unfoldment so that I'm more aware than you. No. But you just acknowledge you created it. That's all you have to do. I created it. It's not that big of a deal. I created it. The second thing is notice your judgments that you're having about what you created and love yourself for having them. We had a whole ceremony last week on loving yourself just the way you are and just the way you are not. Loving yourself for the judgments you put out about yourself, not being good enough, not having done it, not completed it yet. Just love them. They're just thoughts. They aren't the truth. Let's say it together. I love my judgments. I love my judgments. That's all you can do. Because every time you get mad because you have a judgment, you are taking 2 steps backwards. When you just stand there and go, hey, I love my judgments. You're not going to have the same judgment every day. Do you know that? You might judge someone else one day, and the next day, they're your best friend. You might judge this world, and all of a sudden it shifts and something amazing comes. So just bless yourself, love your judgments. We are here to love ourselves. Last week's Valentine's celebration really was about loving ourselves. In the past, we would have couples, and they would come up and they'd stand here on stage, and they'd look in each other's eyes, and they would cry because it's very touching. And this year, it's like, first of all, you can't get that close to other people, so we didn't put people up on stage. And second, it's like now it's time to love yourself so much that no matter who walks into your life, they see you as a bright, shining light of love and of joy and of possibilities. So that's the second one. Notice your judgments and love yourself for having them. So step 3 is I am willing to see something bigger going on than just the surface situation. So you have to begin exploring what's going on instead of being stuck with what it is. It's just what's greater than this? What else am I exploring in this situation or in this belief system or in this judgment? What else is going on that's greater beyond what I'm looking at? So often we see a situation, we only see this one piece, and we judge it. And then all of a sudden, as the weeks unfold, there's a bigger piece. And there's a bigger piece, and all of a sudden we get to the point where we are transformed by the situation. And we are so happy. Because one of our birthright is to live in happiness. Do you know that? It's to live in happiness. So Rupert Spiro does question and answers for 2 hours every day also. And some of the people would start telling their story. And they're telling their story and telling their story. And finally, Rupert says, can you just distill your question, into a sentence? And people had to get clear on what are they asking. But one of the things I thought was real interesting, somebody said, well, I thought the Buddhists say you shouldn't have any desires. What if I have a desire? What do I do about it? And Rupert did this really neat thing on the difference of a desire that comes from you having low self-esteem and you think having that will make you feel better, or a desire that comes from the happiness you give to life. I never really thought of it that way. He said the one, if you desire something and you think it's going to give you better self-esteem, you are banking down the wrong road. Because actually, nothing out there is going to give you better self-esteem. The only way you get better self-esteem is to go inside and realize you're talking about the power and presence of Spirit. It's like, wait a minute. You're complaining about your hair. Well, that's God's hair. What are you complaining? What? Oh, or if you don't have any hair. Okay. Sorry, Larry. So at some point we begin realizing this journey is discovering the divine, discovering God within everything and within ourselves. That's our journey, and it gets exciting. So what else he says? Step 4 is choosing peace. He said 90% of all healings happen when we choose peace. 90% of all healings is when we choose peace and realize the power in spirit. And the 10% of the healing happens because we've released it to God. God does its work. 90% of our thoughts are based on knowing there's a power and a presence, and that I choose peace. So how many choose peace today? Yeah. Is there anybody in your life, any situation, any idea that is keeping you from peace? Person, place, or thing. Anything out there that is in your mind that keeps you from peace, that you think should be different. Do you know when we think something should be different, we're not peaceful? Have you noticed that? Like, why don't they change? Why don't they do that differently? Call your senators, congressmen, and tell them. Allow everyone to do it in a peaceful manner. And then we stay at peace. So anyway, Colin Tipping is going to allow me to put you in this 4-step process. So I'm going to have you just think for one moment if there's somebody in your life that you've brought forth that still takes up space in that mind, that you're kind of judgmental on and maybe critical on. You know, maybe you hadn't thought of him in a while, or her, or that situation, and all of a sudden you're like, maybe it's an ex, not a recent ex, a long ex. So step one, a long ago ex, not somebody who's only been divorced a couple weeks. So step one, think of that person and go, look what I created. Or that situation, look what I created. And then step two, notice your judgment around it and accept and love yourself for having them. Step three, be willing to see something bigger going on than just the surface situation. Move to a higher viewpoint. And 4, make a choice in this moment for peace. It takes a powerful surrendering to do that. So if you're thinking of someone, some situation right now, just bless it. And go, wow, I created that for my greater good. It's unfolding for my greater good. There's something amazing happening in my life. And it is for greater good. Last night I was on a book club Zoom call. Yesterday was my Zoom day. And it was about the book Letting Go. And Cindy said to me, I really admire you and Larry for how you handled your house burning down. And so I was thinking about that. The way what do you do when you get a phone call and fireman says your house burned down? What do you do? Yell and scream and cry and kick and say, no, it didn't? I mean, you just go, hey, I created that. Step number 1, I created that. And when I said that, Larry didn't like it because I said I created it. Because I wanted to sell the house. And it didn't sell. So if it's not going to sell, let's just burn it down and start all over again. So I let go of any judgment about that. There was some, Larry's like, did you have to burn it down just so you want to? It's like we got it. We were starting to remodel. Now we have a whole list of remodel stuff we're doing. And then, but I was willing to see something bigger is going on than just a house burning down. It is about, do I believe that everything happening in my life is always for my greater good, or do I not? That's the only question we have to ask. When something happens that maybe you would have done it differently, I would have had not all of his clothes burned down. My original Gorman, I wouldn't have had that burned down. I wouldn't have had my Amma picture burned down. I would have done it differently. But it happened the way it happened. Because it's all for greater good. A greater opportunity to expand and express. An opportunity to be different, act different, live differently, think differently. It's a way of living peacefully. Because boy, when we're up against, I wish it was different, that is not peaceful. Have you ever been there? Raise your hand if you've ever been there. I wish it was different. Raise your hand if you ever say, I wish they were different. Raise your hand if you ever say, I wish I was different. Where did it get you? Nowhere, and you weren't peaceful. So if those thoughts come up, and sometimes they just do involuntarily, you just say, thank you for sharing. And they move on. Thank you for sharing. I created your thought, and I'm going to create you out the door. Because right now, I choose to live peacefully. So radical forgiveness, bottom line, is really realizing that every single thing, every person, place, and thing in your life has shown up for our own growth, for our walk with the divine, to realize everything is here for our spiritual growth. Everything. Yeah. So we're on this path of knowing that everything is spiritual, and we live in this human world and things happen. So what do? We say, I created that. The minute we say, I created that, you will remember the other 3 steps. I love myself even if I have judgments about it. I can see something beyond that experience, and I choose to live in peace. And then you're going to be so happy. You're going to be jumping around going, I did it, I created it, I'm peaceful. Let's say that together. I did it, I created it, I'm peaceful. Make yourself laugh every day. Find something to laugh about because you are the divine in action. And right now, I declare that you are awakened to your magnificence. You'll never have to forgive again because you realize there's nothing to forgive. You are on that divine path, and I created it is your byline that allows you to realize greater good is unfolding. I bless you. I love you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being in my life. And so it is.